Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendon Traxler.
Well, hello everybody. As you can see, it is just I tonight, and just a real preference thing. We're having internet issues here. I'm having internet issues, and so just FYI. Fortunately, I get a nice solid recording locally, so if there is issues, it can be uploaded. Plus, a plug. Check out the Colonize the Ocean podcast, where I turn all these into podcasts. So you can always go back and listen then. Now it's a visually intensive one. You probably want to check the YouTube or something like that, but this one is not going to be. So I encourage you to do that as well. So anyway, we've got lots to go over tonight. Even though it's just myself, who knows how long this is going to take. So you get to listen to me monologue for the next half hour or so, unless you want to hop in and chat with me. We can definitely do that as well. But I guess we'll just get started on it. And so, I talked last week, and if you do listen to the podcast, it's a series I've been going on with our shorts and stuff along those lines, talking about underwater data centers and the advent of AI and the need for data centers. And so staying in that vein, one of the things to talk about, obviously, is the energy. Is where's the power going to come from to run servers? If anybody that's worked in IT knows that it requires a lot of energy to run those. Now, over the years, we've gotten more effective and more efficient. But when you've got hundreds and hundreds of basically giant computers running, it's going to suck in a lot of energy. So where does that energy come from? And with one of those things, we're wanting to stay green. We need to look at that. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight for a little bit is, making, as the title says, making the blue green, making the oceans a green energy source. So when we look at it, I guess I'll preface it by saying this, especially for this, is you have to look at what is the needs for the underwater habitat. Obviously, we're talking about data centers, but since ASC is all about other types of underwater habitats as well, what is the requirements? Is it a living situation where it's not going to be as intensive? Is it a greenhouse where it's even going to be even less? And or is it just like energy storage or whatever? So there's a bunch of different things, and or scientific research. All these are going to have different energy requirements, and so that sort of dictates how and what type of energy you're going to use and how you're going to get the energy. I will say at the very beginning, this isn't going to be that big of an issue. As we're first starting out there, we're going to take it, ASC or anybody out there. Most of them, you look at Aquarius, you look at Jules, all these other ones, they've either have an umbilical to the surface in some way, is usually how they're doing it, whether it's a generator off-site or whatever. That's how you're getting your energy at this point in time. So for the next several years, that's still going to be the way to do it. So the question is, why even talk about this at this point in time? And the reason is because we need to be looking at those, because if we can start incorporating this type of energy into the systems earlier, first off, it's a good green alternative, so it's very environmentally friendly, but also, the more we can do to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient, the better, in my opinion. So anyway, so let's look at some of the options we've got for energy storage. So we're in the ocean, so we can easily look at tidal or ocean current energy. They're both exist today. They're being used in different parts of the world. To say they're newer technology, I wouldn't go that far, but they're ones that maybe don't get as much attention as some of the other ones, such as solar or wind, but they are right there, and so they're easy to harness. And the nice thing is they're 24/7, and they're not going anywhere. Unlike, and that's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of them, because they are that. You look at wind, you don't always have a wind going on. You look at solar, the sun's not always shining. But with tidal, you've always got tides coming in, going out. And same thing with ocean current. There's always a current moving. So if you can harness those, then they're great. Before we get into the cons and stuff and why that, some other options out there are, as I said, solar and wind. One that doesn't get as much, but is marine biomass. You could use that as well. Another very popular one, and one we've done a video on and talked about before, is OTEC, which is ocean thermal, where you're taking the colder water from down below, pumping it up, and then that change from the colder to the warmer runs a turbine and generates. So again, that's a never-ending cycle as well. So that is one that, if we can get the technology down small enough, that I believe is probably going to be the most likely option moving forward, unless you're throwing out options like nuclear or something along those lines, which they're making those reactors smaller as well, and that's always a possibility. But I think we're a ways away from using those in underwater habitat. So with some of these, especially if you start looking at solar or wind, where it's not a consistent form of power coming through here, you have to look at, then you have to store power. You have to have battery banks. You have to have different ways of having that redundancy there in place. Regardless, it's going to be, you're going to want some sort of power, some redundancy to it, whether it's batteries or it's a lifeline to the surface or whatever. One thing with ASC is, we're all our approach is very modular, whereas you can add on sections as needed. So at first you're going to be tethered to the shore, surface, whatever. But if you're like, hey, this technology's come down in cost, or we want to experiment with it, you can slap on an energy module that could be mostly full of batteries, and that would, run your habitat for however long, depending on what you're doing with it. So the advent of batteries, and as we're seeing it all over the world too, there are more and more places are switching to battery storage as an alternative to your grid, to aspects of the grid. So I think that no matter what, you're going to want that, but it's going to be even a necessity if you're going with something like solar or wind. And the other downside to some like solar and wind is on the surface. So regardless, you're going to have an umbilical down to the habitat, versus the equivalent to wind would be an underwater turbine catching a Gulf Stream or some other type of underwater stream. And then solar is, even though you could probably put it underwater a little bit, you're going to have a degradation of quality and efficiency underwater. Now, I'm sure they'll come out with some sort of, and I've seen different things about, solar that uses no light. So it's not really solar, it's like a negative light type of thing. And as more solar panels become more and more efficient, you could probably put them underwater a little ways. So there's always that option. But I think at first you're probably, if you went with solar at all, it'd be again another floating aspect on the land, a floating platform where you're funneling that down to the habitat. So the pros, though, however, to solar or wind is they are a mature technology. They've been around for quite a while. You see them all over the world, constantly being used, and it's something people are innovating quickly on. So they do have that behind that, versus some of these other technologies, which don't get the notoriety and therefore don't get the innovations or the money behind it to advance them. Again, this is an area where I think the underwater habitats, or just ocean living in general, can further a lot of these, especially OTEC for one. and get that down to a size that's more scalable. Because right now OTEC is being used for larger things, but if you're not powering a large area, having a small OTEC plant in an underwater habitat would definitely solve the problem. Factor that once again with redundancy with having batteries on board. So that's some of the options that we've got going on there. The feasibility aspects of a lot of this, though, it kind of ties into what I was just saying, that there's and I've really covered a lot of this already, that, you know, how I word this properly, that the feasibility of it is you've got, hey, whoever's watching out there, I see you. But yeah, the feasibility, try and collect my thoughts here on this one here and how to word this, because I've already gone over a lot of this anyway. Is going to be the redundancy of it. I think a lot of it. And you may see them using 2 or 3 of these technologies in tandem to generate the power that's needed, whether it is solar during the day, batteries at night, but testing out some sort of wave generation, OTEC or whatever. And maybe you have a primary and a secondary. Obviously, that runs into cost, which we'll talk about in a little while too. But a lot of it has to do with what's available and cost. And I think that, especially getting started, we can't look at this technology here as what underwater habitat's going to be using day one. This is something that a mature habitat, mature company will be using down the road, years down the road, because they're going to have the capital to invest in this, because all these are not cheap formats to try to work with. That's why solar, anybody, you can go out and you can buy solar panels on Amazon or at your, you know, Bass Pro Shop or whatever right now. So that technology is such a consumer grade stuff. You can buy that now, and so you can incorporate that in there. But like I said, it's not ideal for underwater habitats. So with all these other ones that are more ideal, and there's other ones out there. I mean, you could go far out with looking at splitting the H2O and getting hydrogen from it, using a hydrogen plant, and then the O creates your oxygen and stuff along those lines. We can go far out talking about some of this technology that's out there and that we could use to power underwater habitats. But there are a few key ones that we're looking at here. And so the challenges of this are, we talked about a little bit, but it really comes into the economics of it, because we can be using all of these to run an underwater habitat, to run a land location too, but why don't we? And a lot of, you know, I don't want to go conspiracy theory on us here and talk about some crazy ideas like that, but I think a lot of it does honestly boil back to, you know, where the media's attention's at and where people are putting their dollars. And so because solar panel and people like, and we use his name a lot, people like Elon Musk, he's big on solar panels and talking about how you can power the whole entire world with a portion of land and stuff along those lines based on solar panels. And so therefore, because when influential people talk about that kind of stuff, money goes towards it. And I think the same could be said for OTEC or tidal generation. If there was somebody like that came around and said, hey, this is what we need to do, I think that you would see more companies trying to innovate on that and bring those costs down. Going off on a little side tangent here, but I think one of the challenges right now is cost. That being said, there are some technical challenges as well. You know, there's no moving parts really for solar. And with wind, you know, there are moving parts, but again, that technology has been out there for a while. We know how to address it. When you start putting things in the water, the ocean or water in general is a harsh environment, and so it will wear it down quickly. So when you start looking at underwater turbines, it is a moving part underwater that's going to collect everything on it, and it has to be maintenance regularly. The only, you know, and then you've got anything that's pumping water through it. Again, it's that water and all the minerals and the life forms and stuff that are coming through that So even with OTEC and stuff along those lines, those filters, everything has to be cleaned and maintenance regularly. So the maintenance costs on top of these really starts to become a downside to why a lot of these haven't been done. Now, again, like anything, money speaks, and we will see what the future holds. But really, that's the biggest portion of it. When we've got a easy solution that may not be the most efficient, and I want to put that out there, that solar is not the best solution by any means, because it is limited and it's not as efficient of collecting power for the size of it. Whereas you could generate a ton more electricity and power using OTEC or using tidal than you can with solar. But you have those maintenance costs, and simple sometimes easier. And that's the whole KISS method, which keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. And another thing when we're talking about the economics of the whole thing is the initial cost, which we just were talking about as well. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself in these points here, obviously, as I'm getting into it. But fortunately, when it comes to cost, there is a huge push right now for green energy. And so there are a lot of startups out there trying to harness that and be innovative and be different. So they're looking at different ways of even battery storage. I was reading one company was looking at just using sand by itself as a way of storing power, and they're showing how they did that. I've seen different ones of just little like bags on the ocean floor that use pressure to pump and generate electricity that way. There's tons of different people out there and tons of different startups out there looking at different types of technologies to create power, green power, renewable power, and sustainable power. So even though we're listing these ones right here, who's to say in the next 5-10 years, some innovator comes around, doesn't come up with a whole new power system that puts all these to shame. We've got something completely different. And that's very possible. At the end of the day, it's, what can you build? I don't want to say cheaply, but the most cost-effective manner to get it into the hands of the most amount of people. Unless you're trying to go with a premium service, it all depends on who your market is. So there is that. And then obviously, from the get-go, I talked about the environmental aspect of the whole thing. Going green, you're trying to do the best for the environment. And so that means also what kind of impact you have on the environment as well from a physical footprint. And again, that's one reason why people tend to go towards solar, because you hear about the stories of the birds getting killed by the blades on the windmills, and then you've got fish getting caught in different turbines and stuff like that. So there's what do you do to fix that? And underwater, that becomes a very big subject, and it's one that we've talked about before here on because everybody, whenever you start talking about anything ocean related, people start getting a tizzy about you damaging the environment and leaving the oceans alone. We've already done enough damage to land. So it's something we have to be considerate of. Something we have to look at, and something we need to plan around. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one, but it's one that needs to be looked at, and it's one of those reasons why that's why the benefit of this being years down the road, it gives us a little bit of buffer room to figure some of this stuff out. So that being said, I think that's be a good question for people out there, that because a lot of people have been experimenting, and probably even in our groups here that monitor our information and our stuff, is who out there has been not messing around, like that's the word, but experimenting and using different types of off-grid power, whether it is wind turbines, whether it's solar, whether it's geothermal, which is basically the same thing as an OTEC, What have you used? What have you experimented with? What have you found out to be the easiest to set up? Um, you know, I've got ideas. I've also thought, one of the things when you're looking at underwater data centers is you're able to use the water to cool the um, servers and the computers down. Uh, what if you could do the same thing with some sort of cooling system just for people too? Then that wouldn't require as much energy for cooling, which is a huge thing. Running air conditioners, dehumidifiers, all types of things in underwater habitats sucks up a lot of energy. So if there's a way you can use the surrounding water to generate or to negate some of your power usage too, that way you don't need as much power as well. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm explaining that well or not, but there is that to look at too, is how do you use the existing environment around you to not only give you power, but help reduce the need for power as well. So that's really, it's one of these that, when I do these by myself, not having the guys in here sometimes to buffer these ideas off of leads to my mind just going and spewing out information here. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does, let me just say this. ASC is dedicated to putting underwater habitats in the ocean. At the same time, we realize the environment will come into play, and we're not here to damage the environment. And I have to say, almost as like a PSA, I have to put out there regularly, and especially when it starts looking at power generation, is how do we do that in a method that is best to the people looking at purchasing, renting underwater habitats, as well as, which means that we need to keep costs down there, but also how do we do that to be the best to the environment as well? And that's really where it's smarter minds than me come in here to play. And that's why I'm always putting calls out there to people who have these skill sets, that have knowledge like this. That's why we have a great Discord community where we have a lot of very smart people in there where we talk about different stuff from time to time. Even if we, like Adam, Babe, or I don't do any interaction whatsoever, I just saw today a message pop up where somebody was talking about, there's something, I can't remember what it was. I think it was something about power. And I hadn't put anything in there about that, but we just have some really good people in that community. So I definitely a plug for the Discord community, hop in there and let's chat there. But if you have a background in any of this stuff, I would definitely like to talk, see how we can incorporate in some of your ideas or your thoughts into ASC in the future. With that being said, if anybody has any thoughts or questions, we can definitely throw those in chat and I'll try to address those. But I want to move on to some other stuff real quick here. Some stuff that I've been working on and some things that we've talked about we're wanting to get done this year. And one of the things we've talked about is trying to get some sort of almost like a model underwater habitat to put in the water and test some of the stuff out. And I said, I think it was the last time when Babe and I were in here, I have been having a struggling on what to put in there. We talked about maybe doing this, and maybe we didn't do this on live. Maybe we just talked about this off stage, off the live. But one of the problems I've been running into is what do you put in there? We talked about doing like a layout of like an underwater, room, like the underwater suite and stuff like that. That's cool, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of boring, just showing that off. So with us trying to, work on underwater data centers as well, and really that being a big push, I decided maybe we put like an underwater computer in there and then, see how, and then I was watching a YouTuber I watch and he's like, hey, you can build your own AI server locally. And so I built that last night just to see if I could be done. So I had my own ChatGPT equivalent box running locally. So the goal is to run a AI box underwater, which is kind of, what we've been pushing for is we're talking about the advent of AI and how that's going to need power. So that's what I'm working on, is to build a AI with a ChatGPT box, possibly that you can even do image generation on, and then open that up to the public. So that will be something I'm looking at hopefully getting done this summer. It's going to take a lot of work. I've already been running into some problems with just the programming of it itself. And then I also got thinking about maybe if we could water cool that too, I could show off how the water cooling would help that out as well. So that's throwing another wrench in the whole thing. That may be a version 2, but I think definitely getting that. And then if I can find clear enough water to put it in, I'll put a webcam in there as well. All this stuff so that people can log in. They can try the ASC ChatGPT equivalent, ask it some questions, do stuff with it, and just use an underwater AI server, which I think is really cool. I'm building the thing regardless, but getting it underwater and getting it open to the public to use, I think is going to be really cool, and gives everybody out there, all you watching this, something tangible to show that we're working on, and to get a little, some notoriety. So I'm in the process of speccing out what I need and buying the stuff as I dink around with the software and getting that up and running. So if that sounds interesting to you, and if you're a techie and a nerd, I'd love to work with you on it. I've been out of IT now for 6 or 7 years, even though I'm still very passionate about it. There are some things that are out of my wheelhouse that I'm having to really do a lot of research on here. And some stuff that should have been pretty simple, I'm realizing I've forgotten. But that's coming up. So we'll be, and I may even open that up beforehand to test it before we get in the water, and then close it down real quick to go live. But anyway, there is that. What else? What else is going on? There's some other stuff coming up that Babe and me have talked about. Maybe there's a it's a 50th anniversary, I think it was, event for the Sea Lab program down in Florida that we may try to attend. We're still looking at that as far as the scheduling and stuff like that, which I think would be really cool. Yeah. Hey, we're at 30 minutes on this sucker. I think it's going to be a good short one for tonight. So if nobody has anything they want to talk about, if nobody has anything they want to dive into and talk about a little bit deeper than this thing, I will go ahead and wrap it up. We'll let you get some supper in you, let you get to bed early, whatever you want to do. But I will say this, AtlantaSeaColony.com. That is our website. That is where you can find all of our information. It's been recently updated with a bunch of new information, a bunch of new images. The merch store has come down, if you were not aware of that I'm reworking that for a more premium store, wearing stuff like this hoodie. It's got the, wrong side. Atlanta Sea Colony hoodie. It's a nice thin hoodie. That'll be available on there before too long, hopefully. Our resource page is on there. I've changed that. It's more streamlined. All of our socials, any way to find us, get a hold of us is on there. So yeah, that's really basically the place. Really, if you go to Facebook, most of our stuff goes up on there as well. But the ASC has all that stuff in a static location for you to really dig down and deep into it. And from there, you can hit our Discord, which I was just talking about a second ago. There's a great community, a private community where you can get in there, you can chat with us, hang out, ask questions. What I like about it is it's a place where like-minded people can hang out, people that are passionate about this type of thing, and we talk about different stuff. So that's cool. And one of the things is if you're a Patreon member, which is patreon.com/AtlantaSeaColony, there are tiers in there where you can get in there and we can voice chat and we can hang out and do different stuff. We talked about trying to figure out different things we can do in there to add not value, but just fun for Patreon members and stuff. And we're still trying to figure that out. So if people have ideas on that and want to head that up, I'm game. But with Patreon, if you're unfamiliar with Patreon, which at this point in time, I think most people know what it is, but basically it's a subscription platform that helps creators and helps people like us do what we're trying to do. And really, we have different tiers in there. The cheapest tier is $5. And with that, for $5 a month, you get access to most things. And then we have a $15 and $25 tier. So some of those, all those members are Brian Acosta, Matthew Cathy, Martin Reese, Babe, Adam, and then my dad. And most of these people have been with us for quite a while now, have really been helping us out. And what this does is it allows not only like software like this, but it allows us to hire people to do our graphic designs, allows us to, pay for just all the little minor things that we have going on to run different aspects of this business, and to send out the information to try to get new leads and to talk to investors and rub shoulders, I guess, with those, if you want to put it that way. So it definitely does help. So if that is something you're interested in, please hit me up. We can talk about it more, or you can just go straight over there to the Patreon and sign up. $5 a month. That's, one Starbucks coffee. So if you look at it that way, that's how much. But I understand, especially with inflation stuff here in the United States, everybody's watching their pennies. So I totally get it. But I would appreciate it if that you believe in the vision of AFC and you are passionate about underwater habitats, just like we are, and especially me, that you would think about that. I would definitely appreciate it. The more money, and it's hard because I hate to talk about money, but the more money that we can get in there, and the quicker we can do that, the more things we can do to move this along further and faster. Is bottom line is what it comes down to. So that's my plug on that. With all that being said, I think we're going to wrap it up. I thank everybody that was able to join us live. If you're watching this later, thank you. Leave comments below. As always, if you're on, depending on what platform you're like, subscribe, give us all those algorithms. We need it to boost our information out there to reach more people. So thank you. Have a great week. Have a great night. We'll talk to you later.